Fosta deținătoare a titlului Miss Israel dezvăluie pentru rețeaua de știri JNS provocările de imagine cu care se confruntă țara sa în mediul internațional. Pornind de la experiențele din campusul universitar Berkeley, aceasta explică de ce dezbaterile raționale eșuează în fața preconcepțiilor și cum selectarea subiectivă a faptelor distorsionează realitatea. Vă invităm să vă abonați la canalul nostru, să oferiți o apreciere și să distribuiți acest material pentru a susține munca redacției noastre. Echipa Jurnal Info.
How's everybody doing? So we've just heard some beautiful words from President Herzog and Speaker Ohana. And we've also talked about something that's a little bit personal to me about Mamdani, who, as many of you know, I believe, is not only a monster, but this extends to his relationship with his wife, who herself didn't want to take a photo with me. But I'm not here to talk about that. This is ultimately a plenary about Israeli innovation. So I want to take a second to address something a little bit less comfortable than all the amazing, remarkable things that Israel contributes to the world. I want to talk about what the world does with those achievements once it sees them. I come from the same world being celebrated on this stage. I started my journey as a data scientist and later built a tech company of my own, which gave me a front row seat to Israel's incredible capabilities for innovation. And like most people from that world, I used to believe something simple. If you give people better data, they reach better opinions. And maybe that came easily to me as a Jew, because we ultimately are a people that are built around emet, truth, the conviction that if you explain something clearly enough, that will win on its own. But I unfortunately watched that theory fail years before October 7th, when I was a student at Berkeley. Berkeley, as many of you might know, is one of the most hostile campuses in the world for Jewish students and for supporters of Israel. Yet the hostility there had nothing to do with a lack of intelligence or a lack of facts. People who could out-argue anyone in a room would still arrive at a fixed verdict about Israel that no fact was going to move. October 7th proved to us the same thing at a different scale. Evidence that would hold up in any court on earth somehow changed remarkably few minds. It turns out that the theory that I started with probably had it backwards. Most people don't build their beliefs around the facts in front of them. They choose the facts that fit the beliefs that they already have. 2 months touring American campuses and communities confirmed it for me again just recently. I just came back a few weeks ago. And I realized that the fight we are in is not primarily a fight over information. It is a fight for familiarity. And we cannot win that fight by repeating the same talking points to people who stopped listening to them a long time ago. We have an extraordinary amount to make people familiar with. By any honest measure, and I'm going to focus on this because this is a plenary about our innovation, we are one of the most influential ecosystems on Earth. We have the highest civilian R&D spend relative to GDP on the planet, a startup density that dwarfs nations 50 times our size, a footprint in AI, cybersecurity, and medicine that exceeds far beyond our borders. But innovation, we are a global force, but innovation is not only about technology. At its core, innovation is the ability to solve problems in ways that others have not thought to try. And if Israel has mastered anything, it is that building what does not yet exist is what we're the best at. The question is whether we are applying that same innovative thinking to one of the greatest challenges that we are facing today: how people come to know us in the first place. None of our success protects us from being flattened. For people already determined to hate us, our success does not make us less of a target. It actually makes us a bigger one, the big bad wolf instead of the underdog. Whether we are weak or strong, the people determined to reduce us to a single dimension and to flatten us will always find an angle that works, which means that no amount of correcting or rebutting will ever break this cycle. The caricature will simply change shape and wait for us on the other side. For years, we have poured endless energy into trying to change this dynamic and to shift the narrative. We have, rightly, fought hatred and disinformation as the existential threat that it is, the way that anyone would fight a house that is on fire, lined up, passing buckets down the line as fast as we can. And our community has unified and mobilized in extraordinary ways in order to do so. But there is also a cost to standing in that line too long. We start to look and feel, even to ourselves, like a people defined by the fire rather than by everything that we built before it. Flattened into exactly the narrative that our adversaries want. War, division, headlines, and little to do with who we really are. And while we are in that line, we miss the places where the world actually comes together around something other than conflict. These are cultural spaces, whether they're Miss Universe, the Olympics, Eurovision, or a football match. Places where people and countries are seen as their most human, in their most human form, through arts, through sports, even beauty. Expression that transcends headlines in ways that rebuttals never will. Being Miss Israel has taught me to believe in that. In a world growing more willing to flatten and dehumanize, there are still bridges that we can build that will actually break through. 8 months ago at Miss Universe, a Miss Israel and a Miss Palestine shared the same stage for the first time in the competition's history. And many of you may remember the wave of disinformation and hatred that followed, much of it aimed at me just for being in the room. And still, that stage gave me something headlines and comment sections never do. A chance for hundreds of millions of people to see a different side of who we are. Not the side defined by headlines, but the parts of us that have nothing to do with the conflict at all. Our culture, our food, our humor, the warmth we show the people we let into our lives, the love of life that runs through this country no matter what we are facing. That is Israel at its root. And it turns out that is also just being human. What surprised me most was not that people changed their opinions. It was that some became willing to suspend them long enough to see something else. One thing I discovered in this role is how often the impact of cultural ambassadors is only recognized after the fact. There are Israelis and Jews serving as cultural ambassadors every single day in sports, technology, entertainment, academia, and the arts, who are reaching audiences that traditional advocacy never will, and often with far fewer resources than we devote to responding to crises once they erupt. If Israel became a superpower by investing in innovation before the need was obvious, perhaps we should apply the same logic here. We know how extraordinary Israel is, and how important the fight against hatred will always be. But it is just as important that we refuse to be consumed by fighting that fire until we reach the point where it defines us. A video with 100,000 views will rarely leave the room of people who already wanted to watch it. What will actually move the world is slower than that and more durable. Genuine connection. Something that every one of us already has access to. The World Cup happening right now is a great example of this. The entire planet is currently setting aside narratives to unite, to cheer for the same thing all at once. Building more of that, deliberately, deserves to be treated as more than an afterthought. Because in technology, we understand that a model trained on incomplete data will produce distorted outputs. Human beings are not so different. If the only data that people receive about Israel is conflict, then conflict will become the only model that we can build. And if we allow conversations about us to mostly occur within the frame that our adversaries have chosen for us, then we are helping train the same incomplete model. Our task is not only to correct the data, it is to expand the data set. Because the most innovative solution is not always a better response. Sometimes it is refusing to accept the frame of the problem in the first place. And that starts on a much smaller scale than a stadium, with each of us building the same bridges in our own lives, starting with the people already around us. Abraham's tent stood open on all four sides, so that a stranger arriving from any direction would find their way in. And that was never a metaphor. I like to see that as one of the earliest instructions we were ever given as a people. And it still is. Invite someone into your home. Let them see you, who you really are. Let them see who we are. Let them see Israel not as an argument to be won, but as a beauty to be shared. This is how we show the world the superpower that we actually are. Not a society capable of extraordinary technology, because we are, but just a people. That is how the flattening ends, whether the room is a global stage or a table set for two. Not with better corrections, with better invitations, and by investing as intentionally in being known as we do in being defended. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to all the incredible work that JNS does, and to the impact that all of you have. It's truly an honor.